So thank you, Denise. I want to thank my wife who's here. And I would not be before you at this journey without my wife, Barbara. It's my wife right there. Yeah. Ed Muth back there, he's one of the legendary directors. Ed has been around a long time. We have been comrades in the movement, theater movement. My niece is here, Nadine, okay? Or my wife's niece. Yeah, I'll get it straight. What I'd like to do is start off with, this is the book that I used for my theater class at Texas Southern. And I'd like to read something to you that I ask my students often about the origin of theater, where did theater begin? Of course, a lot of young students often say Greece. And even though there was great theater in Greece, it's not where actual human theater began. Now, this is what this book says, and I wanted to start off with that. How did drama begin? No one knows for sure, but the theater, along with human civilization itself, almost certainly began in Africa. The first known dramatic presentations occurred in northern Africa alongside the Nile River in ancient Egypt about 4,500 years ago, and possibly as early as 3,300 BC. African theater, however, is older than that. Indications of ritual performance can be seen in activities of literally hundreds of African tribal groups, dating back as far as 6,000 BC. Unfortunately, we know very little about such performances because unlike the arts of paintings and sculpture, there are no permanent records. But it is very likely they resemble tribal performances widely seen in ritual Africa today. And from such present-day performances, we can see the two foundations of theater as it has been known throughout the course of human civilization. Ritual and storytelling both have existed since ancient times, and both can be seen, though in different forms, wherever theater is performed. Let's be clear. The origin of theater began in ancient Africa, in Egypt, with storytelling. This is not to discredit the Greeks, but when we often talk about storytelling, it is old as time. African storytelling. Oh my, hey, one of my friends, African storytelling. So I wanted to start with that because even today, if I can fast forward, I often talk to some of the rappers, these brilliant young rappers, and I tell them that what rap is a form of storytelling. Rap, it is. It's storytelling. And it is a result of the evolution of Black theater. So when we talk about Black theater, we're talking about Africa, storytelling. The griots, or the griot was the ancient storyteller, telling stories, using drums and music. What happened with the Europeans when they arrived in Africa, they assumed that theater did not exist because it was not written, but it was oral, or as what we call orature. So their assumption was that they didn't have theater. If they did have it, it had to be primitive. And you cannot define other people's culture basically coming from your perspective. But Africa existed. African theater was rich and vibrant when the Europeans came. Storytelling predates the written word. It was, as we call it today, spoken word. In African storytelling, the griot was a medium for the story, often combined with drumming, dance, mask, or costumes. And improvisation, these combined acts of cultural expression can be considered rituals. The foundation of all theater is ritual. Ritual. I often ask my students, give me some contemporary rituals that they know of. And once I start them off, they get an idea. For example, let me give you an example. African Americans, when we have African weddings, we often do what? Jump the broom, a ritual. In traditional American weddings, they used to throw rice. Rice is expensive, but they don't throw no rice no more. But they used to throw rice. That's a ritual. Now you name me a couple of rituals. Let's keep it going just for a while, just some little rituals. Now all rituals don't have to be religious. Okay, they don't have to. So what is another ritual?
Joining an organization.
Huh?
Joining an organization.
But what would you do in the organization as a ritual? What are there some specific things you would do?
You make a pledge.
That's a ritual. Saluting flag is a ritual. Okay, even though it's non-religious, it's a ritual. So we are surrounded by rituals. So that is the driving force of theater, rituals, and it began in Africa. Ritual is the basic foundation of African storytelling and oral performance. Arts in Africa are orature. Compared to the written literature, African orature is composed and transmitted as a form of storytelling. One thing that happened in Africa was that many people, those who came to Africa, did not understand that theater existed everywhere. There was no definition for theater in Africa. It was not a building. It was not a facility with a box office. And those who came did not understand that theater existed everywhere in Africa. So those missionaries who came with their own, imposing their definition of what human theater is about. It did not have to be in a specific place. There was no charge for theater in Africa. There was no downstage and upstage, no fourth wall. But that did not mean that Africa did not exist. So Europeans assumed that since there was no evidence of written language, then Africa was void of literature and therefore no theater. They brought their own definition of theater based upon Western standards. There was no space, no box office, as I said, no backstage, no lobby. Theatrical art in Africa, therefore, is very ancient and its origins lost in prehistory. Yet, it is a part of everyday life in public spaces and at home. Everywhere, theatricality is evident in Africa, everywhere. There's no sense of looking for a specific place. The slightest pretext often give rise to complex theatrical events where music, dance, and verbal parody figure in equal parts. The African has always lived in close accord with theater and theatrical. The performative, to use a contemporary term, is an integral part of his or her identity. The European colonization of Africa, an ancient cultural expression. Let's go to that slide there. Well, we had African, go back to, I'm sorry. I'm on a tangent, I forgot, I've got slides here, I'm in another zone, so forgive me. We've seen storytelling, and now let's move to, that's it, the African Grove Theater. But stay there for the African Grove Theater, because I'm gonna talk about the rituals. Since ritual and religious belief permeates all of African culture and art, the missionaries set out to outlaw, suppress all forms of indigenous art forms such as drumming, dance, African storytelling, and ancestral worship. So this dismantling and destruction of the oldest human theater on earth, the missionaries saw African theatrical ritual and dances as sexual and superstitious. The African slave trade. What does that have to do with African theater, you might say? What does the African slave trade has to do with African theater? What was once a continent beaming with great empires is now being plundered and ravaged and raped of its ancient history and, yes, theatrical rituals. Now the king, the queen, the griot, the healer, the diviner, men and women and children will now become enslaved through the whip and the gun and the ankle chain and the mouth lock and the tongue cutter. the rape and the castration, the rope and the Bible. Now the African memory is outlawed. The African memory is outlawed. Why are you talking about slave trade and memory, but we're supposed to be talking about African theater? You can't leave that out. Art is not devoid of history. When Europeans came, they came to make sure that they reconstruct the African image, to develop, to take away our memory, because memory is culture. Now the African's memory is outlawed. The drums illegal. Of course they made the drums illegal because it was the, in a sense, it was a communication with the gods. Dance is illegal. They often thought that African dance was vulgar. Now everybody's doing our dances. Banned, his spoken word, his desire to read, punishable. You couldn't read. What is the point of talking about this in African theater? Because we are a theater of resistance. We had to have something in our memory to keep from losing our connection with the ancestors. Now there's no storytelling once African slaves came, was brought here. No rituals, no theatrical indigenous form, only the plantation and a sea of cotton. But African ancient theater could not be totally suppressed. What we could not speak, now we communicated in other ways. So the drum is illegal, we spoke in other ways. For example, through ham bone or through ways of talking through quilts, where they leave messages. We hid our journey to escape in our quilts. We let loose our spirituals and coded our gospels. Again, why are you talking about black theater and the gospel? That is the foundation. Keep in mind that the black church came first before black theater. Yes, I said that. I will go out on a limb and say that. The black church existed prior to black theater. They didn't allow us to have theater on the plantation. The black church came. So we're going to talk about how significant the black church is to the evolution of black theater. The African Grove Theater, the first successful theater in America. In 1821, 9 years before the rise of blackface minstrelsy, which I'll comment on later, the African Grove Theater opened in New York City, founded by Alexander Brown, a pioneering actor and playwright. It opened 6 years before the abolition of slavery. 6 years before the abolition of slavery, there was a theater. 6 years. Black people had a theater. That's why I'm passionate about passing this to my students. That theater did not start once we got to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619, okay? In terms of going back to Africa. So it was the African Grove Theater. So you can stay on that slide. The African Grove Theater opened in New York City. The African Grove Theater was attended by all types of black New Yorkers, free and slave, middle class and working class, along with others. It was the first place where Ira Aldridge, who would later become an esteemed, renowned Shakespearean actor, first saw a production of a Shakespeare play. They were doing Shakespeare, not minstrelsy, not coons and mammies and bucks. They were doing Shakespeare in 1821. After a few years, the city officials shut down the African Grove because of complaints about conduct. Hold on to your seats here. Conduct was normal among working class white New York theater audiences at the time, who was considered unacceptably boisterous and when displayed by blacks. It is thought that the real reason was because this theater was booming as successful as many other venues. Other sources say that the theater was mysteriously burned to the ground in 1826. There are no records of the African Grove Theater after 1823. What does that mean? Whites came to the theater, but they were making noises and being outlandish. But it was mysteriously burned down. They opened a theater next to a very popular theater. And let me read this passage here. When the Park Theater, New York's leading theater of the time, putting on Richard III, starring English tragedian Junius Brutus Booth, the African Theater rented a hall next door for its own production of the same play, the same night. Theatrical competition was stiff. Stephen Price, owner of the Park, orchestrated and paid for a disturbance over the revival productions so that police would shut down the African Grove Theater. They did such a successful job that they shut it down and burned it down. What am I saying here? That African theater did not develop out of leisure time. It was a struggle to maintain and to legitimize our image. And that's what it's all about, making our images legitimate. Let's talk about now blackface. Thomas Dart, that is the African Grove. That's the building, the earlier building. That's the one that I think that's in New York at this time. All right, the next slide, and that's the actual original building in New York. And let's talk about this. Slavery was not enough. There had to be something else to come along to paint a picture to the rest of the world that these Africans who came are not human, or that they are basically caricatures and stereotypes. Thomas Dartmouth Rice, an actor born in New York, is considered the father of minstrelsy. After reportedly traveling to the South and observing slaves, Rice developed a black stage character called Jim Crow. There's a connection between Jim Crow and this character. White performers in blackface played characters that perpetuated a range of negative stereotypes about African Americans, including being lazy, ignorant, superstitious, hypersexual, criminal, or cowardly. Blackface minstrelsy was considered an insult to African Americans, but it was the most popular form of theater in America. Blackface minstrelsy was the most popular form of theater in America. And many immigrants who first came to America, this is the image they saw. Many working class whites who came to the theater was able to see these images. And you know about the exaggerated, the enlarged eyes, the big lips, the dark hair. So this is the same guy with the blackface on. But remember, there's a political motive for blackface minstrelsy. It wasn't simply because they wanted to make fun of us, but because there needs to be something going on that allows people to see that once African Americans begin to talk about Emancipation Proclamation or the Civil War or rights, there had to be something that reminded people that they do not deserve those rights. So art is used for that. Blackface minstrelsy. Let's go to the next slide. Stay there. When I show this title to my students, they say, whoa, that's the title. All coons look alike to me. Ernest Hogan. Now this again, but let me show you another side. And I'm not condoning this, but that's another awkward part of history here. I asked my students, if you were a black actor then, would you wear blackface? Because at first, all of the characters were white actors because it was lucrative. Then black actors began to also do blackface. I asked my students often, would you wear blackface in order to at least not be held to the cotton field? Would you put on a blackface? Some said yes, some said no. But in all fairness, many black groups developed out of blackface minstrelsy, and they began to wear the blackface, and they began to do these dances. So it is an awkward thing in history where you have to decide art over your personal development. But I'm not to criticize those black men and women who wore blackface, because many famous black actors came out of that era and transitioned from blackface to becoming very popular artists and singers. So you have to look at the broad, look at that. Blackface minstrels soared into popularity, in particular during the period after the Civil War. This is a very important point. It became popular after the Civil War. That's a political move. After the Civil War, there had to be something that contained the images of these people who now consider themselves wanting freedom. The widespread demeaning portrayals of African Americans paralleled a period when Southern state legislators were passing black codes to restrict the behavior of former slaves and other African Americans. In fact, the codes were also called Jim Crow laws after the blackface stage character. So art, again, is used as a form of propaganda to contain. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and the next one here. Now, Meloncon, this is getting too dark. You should be talking about black theater. I'm just being facetious here. Why you want to show that? Why can't we just show black theater? History had to go on. And just keep in mind that when people say that we should just simply talk about the good parts that has happened, but African Americans had to endure realities like this and at the same time maintain their sanctity. See what I'm trying to say? I'm not trying to show this to anger you, to make you feel bad, but I cannot deny history, and I can't paint a rosy picture. There were people in your, maybe 2 generations in your family, okay? If we go back 2 in your family, who said, yes, I remember that period. And at the same time, we had to hold on to our faith in the higher being, and at the same time, go on and try to remain sane. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, I said that I showed that and this. That's why I went after this. Students, if you have not seen this movie, if you haven't read about it, please, this is a pivotal point in history. This movie, the foundation of it, was a way to organize the Ku Klux Klan. Oh, Mom, you're getting too political, Mr. Meloncon. You're too serious. Yes, I am. Very serious about this. These are facts. In 1915, 50 years after the end of the Civil War, D.W. Griffith released his epic film, Birth of the Nation. The greatest, hold on to your seats, the greatest blockbuster of the silent era. Birth of the Nation was seen by estimated 200 million people by 1946. 200 million people saw the Birth of the Nation. It was shown in the White House. Meloncon, what this got to do with black theater? That's theater for them. Whenever you talk about theater, you talk about storytelling and images, am I right? Storytelling, narratives. So when people see the Birth of the Nation, and they could see that the plot line is driven around black men's obsession with white women. This was a blockbuster. This was the first blockbuster movie based upon the deconstruction of our images of us. Okay, the Birth of the Nation. Let's go to the next slide. World's mightiest spectacle. Look at those, the world's mightiest spectacle. How much did it cost to get in there? I think one of them has the cost. Is at the bottom. $1, the balcony, 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, yeah. And it was packed. The Birth of the Nation. It's a strange kind of thing because it looks like wherever there's a leap in terms of film, novels, we're always in the center. when there's a leap, you see what I'm trying to say, in terms of an advancement of how to tell, we seem to be in the mix. And I'm going to try to stay on track here, but when you look at Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe, greatest novel ever written. Who was it about? Us. Birth of the Nation, us. One more time. Uncle Tom's Cabin, us. Us. The image of us have been distributed around the world. And I say this with pride. That's why we have to keep telling our stories. I'm not angry. I'm saying we got to keep telling the stories. Black theater has to keep telling those stories. History is usually written by winners, but that wasn't the case with The Birth of the Nation when released February 8, 1915. In just over 3 hours, it was a 3-hour movie. 3 hours, D.W. Griffith's controversial epic film about the Civil War and Reconstruction depicted the Ku Klux Klan as valiant saviors of the post-war South ravaged by Northern carpetbaggers and immoral freed black people. The film was a blockbuster, and with innovative cinematography and a Confederate skewed point of view, The Birth of a Nation also helped to rekindle the KKK. Can I say it again? The Birth of the Nation also helped to rekindle the Ku Klux Klan. Now, let's go to the next slide. And that is another one, yes, Eighth Wonder of the World. That's what they called it. Eighth Wonder of the World. Founded on The Klansman. Now, Klansman was an earlier novel. That was the earlier title was The Klansman, if I get my history straight, okay? And that's it. Go back to that novel. 50 cents and 75 cents. Reserve your seats today, early. The hours of gripping, appealing, blood-tingling, soul-stirring interest. Blood-tingling, soul-stirring. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now let's talk about the Great Migration. Well, Meloncon, you smoking dope? What this got to do with black theater? Did you and your wife smoke a joint before you came here? No, I didn't. At least right now I hadn't, you know. I did it for medicinal. Anyway, 1920, the Great Migration. 6 million African Americans moved from the South to the North. We was getting the hell out of the South. Tired of cotton. Students, somewhere in your generation, you got some folk who migrated. Keep asking. Great-grandmother, somebody migrated. And black people got out of the South. To escape racial violence, pursue economic opportunities, and obtain freedom from oppression of Jim Crow. Black people came from the South, migrated from the South to the North. And what did they bring with them? Narratives, the blues, folk songs, stories. They brought that. It wasn't just wagons and mules. They brought with them, embedded in their genes, the stuff of novels. That's right. The stuff of great novels and plays based upon what they brought. They brought the blues with them. They brought great storytelling with them. We all have grandmothers and great-grandmothers and fathers who can sit down and tell you stories. Guess what? Even ghost stories. Am I right? They brought with them, but they didn't come empty-handed. They brought with them in their cotton-worn fingers and voices the blues, folk ballads, and stories about hard times under Jim Crow. These were the new storytellers. Stay with me. These were the storytellers coming back again, reincarnated, You see, you put us in the South, you couldn't keep that Africanness out of us. No way. Enduring people, you deny the drum, we do the ham bone. We're gonna drum now, we're gonna do something. You can't deny us. We're gonna go something culturally that allows us to stay what, sane. My wife gonna get on me about what I just did. Yeah, how many of you have ever heard of the ham bone? How many of you never heard of the ham bone? That's another whole story, how the human body is a drum. Am I right? It's a drum, okay? These new storytellers, the griots singing their stories, passing memory and truth to the next generation. Slave narratives became fuel for the black literature, black theater, and film. Can I say that again? Slave narratives became fuel for black literature, black theater, and film. Slave narratives. Black men and women who could not write, but they could talk the story. They could not read, but memory. Remember, I said earlier, they tried to deny and keep our memory. They tried to keep our memory dead. Your memory is powerful. Am I right? Your memory is the root of your life is your memory of beautiful things. So they brought with them that. The Great Migration drew thousands of African Americans to New York City, many of them to Harlem, where the Harlem Renaissance flourished in the 1920s. The Harlem Renaissance. You know about it. Whenever I go to New York, first thing I do, catch the train, go to Harlem. I got to go to Harlem, I'm sorry. All that other stuff, I got to go where my people is, my peoples. Where Langston Hughes writing. Zora Hill Nursing was there. I walked through Harlem, I just absorbed it. Man, all these spirits that came through here. You got to go to Harlem. The Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was known as the New Negro Movement. The New Negro Movement embraced more than literature. It included race building, keyword, race building, image building, jazz, poetry, socialist politics, racial integration. Look at those words, race building. So it was about reconstructing our memory again. The Harlem Renaissance, what a great period. Great poetry. So many great poets that came out of that period. And of course, it was a time of jazz when many whites came down to Harlem to the clubs. Of course, Jim Crow still had, Jim Crow, you know, he was still there in New York now. He knew how to catch the train too. Because there were places that you couldn't even go to the jazz club if you were black. Whites could go in, but unless you serving, you ain't going to that jazz club. Okay? But there were great, and of course you have I'm going blank. One of my plays was there. Help me, baby. What's play was that? That's my memory over there. I did What Happened to Black Love at
The Diary of Black Men and Whatever Happened to Black Love.
At what theater?
Whatever Happened to Black Love and Diary were both at the Apollo.
Thank you, the Apollo. I say that for this reason. And please, I hope I'm trying to be as humble as possible. But when my play was at the Apollo, I couldn't believe it. Not for me, but the fact that one day I always go before the play starts. I'm walking on the stage by myself, knowing that Callaloo was on that stage. Give me a break. All these great jazz musicians, I became humbled as a playwright. That's all I'm trying to say. I was humbled. To be there. So the Harlem Renaissance was very, very important to us in terms of race building, legitimizing our images. But also remember there was a lot of communism going on at the time, supposedly. A lot of folk were being jailed because supposedly they were connecting with socialism. Langston Hughes, if I get my history straight, was once accused of being a socialist. You see what I'm trying to say? But it was a period of ideological hunger that people were studying all these great ideologies. But listen, I want to say this. Okay, let's go to the next one. So, some of the greats. Now, I have to say this to you, and that is, I've talked about the Harlem Renaissance. I cannot leave, there are names that I cannot leave out. We can stay right there on that one. I can't leave out Amir Baraka, Leroy Jones, the father of the Black Arts Movement. I'm not being prejudiced here, but that was my mentor. Leroy Jones is considered the father of the Black Arts Movement. And he influenced so many other great writers. Larry Neal was one of the intellectuals. The thing about the Black Arts Movement is that we were looking for a Black aesthetic that defined us, okay? That defined our beauty and our purpose. Now, I'll tell you this. That's what Black theater started, in that place. Okay, that's where it started. The Black church is theatrical. Am I right? Come on now, you Baptist folk. It's ritual, ain't it? If you look at and read and look at the rituals in the Black church, call and recall, amen, 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 amen. Louder, amen, amen. That's African. There's no fourth wall in the Black church. The preacher be sliding up and down the aisle like James Brown. Right? It ain't no, you can't go past this the wall. People get up and shout. Sister Lucy, been in the church 100 years. She get up and start shouting, falling back. Am I right? I'm not making a mockery of this, students. This is cultural power. That's what the Black church theater started from. The Black church. I may go out on a limb and tell you this. The Black preacher was the first rapper. Hold it, Meloncon, wait a minute, you smoking dope again. If the Black sermon is not rap, what is? It's rhythm, it's a song, it's beat, it's drum music. It's improvisational, right? Everything we do in terms of culturally in Black folks is almost improvisation, it's spontaneous. Right? Sister Lucy, in the middle of starts singing a gospel song. Nobody gonna tell her not to. She's the founder of the church. She just starts singing. What did everybody do? Join in. It's not rehearsed. So Black theater evolved from the Black church. I have to say that very clear so we can be clear about that. Finally, on this journey, there's one sacred place founded by the African Americans that was and is independently controlled without the influence of the white America is the Black church. Without the Black church, there would be no Black theater. Please make no mistake about this. Black theater was born out of the Black church. Black theater did not exist first. Out of the Black church. Everything came out of our church. Sister Johnson started, most of the singers, the blues singers started where? In the church. They did, in the church. Thomas Dorsey was a blues singer. Thomas Dorsey is considered the father of gospel. Am I right? He was a blues singer. That's why some gospel, hold on till you see, some musical parts of gospel sound like the blues because there's the blues element, right? I listen to KTSU all the time, and it starts with what it sounds. Damn, what is that, a blues song? And then they go, Lord help me, Jesus. I thought it was about to go into the blues because we do not separate the musical forms. We're not that tight. about you can't move this over here. We experiment. One musical form influences another in terms of African Americans. Am I right? So that's the black. So I'm passionate about this point that we will not be, black theater would not exist without it. It owes its birth to the black church, and the black minister and the black preacher was the rebirth of the griot, the storyteller, using dramatic improvisations, amens from the congregation, was and is calls and recall. The chorus of the doo-wop. We created the doo-wop. Am I right? We do. My girl, talking about my girl, my girl. There you on dope again. All this is, I say this in a humorous way because all of it's tied in together in terms of taking back what was taken from us and enriching it, taking back what was taken from us, okay? Now, let's keep going. I'm gonna start summing up now. Beautiful pictures. When I look at pictures, sometimes I say, oh my Lord. Go back to the ladies there. I don't know about you, but sometimes pictures draw me into it. And I say, oh, I'm okay when I say this. I wish I could disappear and just appear right there. And I know I look at a lot of TV. I wish I could just touch them and say, sister, I love you. Wait, why you dressed like you dress? I'm from a different time. I'm just saying, we gonna make it. I'm from another era, but sister, I'm gonna hug you. I gotta go now, but remember, keep doing what you're doing, because we gonna make it. And I might say, we gonna have a president. What, a black president? I love pictures like this because they are sophisticated. They make you feel proud, okay? And remember, black women move the church. The black preacher may be preaching, but who moves the church? Women. Okay, black women. Okay, let's go to the next one. Beautiful picture. And I often think these little kids and their offsprings may be living today, right? Maybe living today. The black church. All right, let's go on. Now, let's talk about the black arts movement. The black arts movement was the second Renaissance. Harlem Renaissance, black theater movement was the second Renaissance. Don't just call it the black theater, the black arts movement. It was a Renaissance. There's comparisons between the Harlem Renaissance and the black arts movement. This was I know some of you are very young here, but this was the 1960s through the 70s. The black arts movement was about capturing our image again, but it was also about making black theater accountable, making black theater not simply theater for the art. We talked about, I say we because I was part of that, the late part of the 60s and the 70s, that we talked about being able to talk directly from stage about racism. We talked about telling our stories. We talked about being able to come up with a black aesthetic that redefined us. So let's go to the next one. There he is. I tell my students, if you fail this on the test, that one question, you repeat the class next Sunday. I'm gonna reserve a seat for you. If you don't get that right, am I promoting him over anybody else? He was considered the father of the black arts movement, with other people who also he influenced. And he was a poet and a playwright and an integral part of the black. Let's go to the next slide. These are some of the great people: James Baldwin, Gwendolyn Brooks, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Tom Dent, Audre Lorde, Nikki Giovanni. All these are poets. Larry Neal was one of the intellectuals of that period. Ed Bullens, the great Maya Angelou. These were the people who were a part of the second Renaissance. Let's go to the next one. Ismail Ndizake, Umbra Workshop, Sarah Wright, Steve Cannon, all these are great. Barbara Ann Teal was one of the pivotal pioneers of black theater in New York. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now that's the building. Am I right, babe? That's the building, the present building for the National Black Theater. Barbara and Teal's building in New York City. Isn't that a nice building? In New York City. And of course, you had the Negro Ensemble. There were so many great theaters in New York. That's what I love about going to New York. You don't have to find, you got to be blind if you can't find a theater in New York. Every other block is a theater. And that's what I love about it. And I just love New York because it is a rich cornucopia of so many cultures and people and activity. All right, let's go to the next one. You got, and here's what I did. Now, I tried to include as many people as I can. Because to talk about theater and not talk about Houston to say, well, Houston is, and some people think they have this bad rap on Houston, that all we do is ride horses, barbecue. Well, the barbecue part is right. Theater, Houston has an image. We do theater. Houston Negro Theater, founded in 1931. People don't know that. Houston Negro Theater, 1931. Founded by Robert Holland. The Urban Theater, founded in 1969 by Barbara Marshall. Barbara Marshall was one of the great legends. Please believe me. Barbara Marshall, what a beautiful person. She had Urban Theater. I was one of the founders of Sudan Art Southwest Theater Ensemble, founded in 1969 by me and Cornell Linson. And Margie Walker, who's not here, was one of the members. The Sudan Art Southwest Theater Ensemble, we had a space, but we traveled. We often think of theater as you, why you call yourself theater if you're not in a building? We were theater, but we went to Fourth Ward. And this is what we did, students. We actually, we actually went to Fourth Ward, and we actually went through the streets of Fourth Ward with our drums and drew people out of their houses to the park and then performed. One more time. Dashiki Zone. Walked through the forest, Pan-African drum. People said, what is that? Children followed us to the park. That ain't no, who said it ain't theater? Please don't do that. That's theater. It's theatrical, okay? That's what we did. And we travel places. So the Sudan Art Southwest was one of the theaters. Then we have the Ensemble Theater. The Ensemble was founded in 1976 by George Hopkins. Of course, you know about the Ensemble. They do great work there. They've been around a long time. George Hawkins started, get ready for this, in a pet shop on 2M. There used to be a pet shop. It was so small that people go to the restroom, they would see the actors back there trying to change. Excuse me. Can you wait? I got to put this costume on, okay? I'm sorry, I used to go there. The ensemble, so George Hawkins, and of course Eileen Morris is the artistic director, so they've been around a long time. Coombe House Theater. I was one of the founders along with Linda Yenny. The Coombe House Theater, here's a little secret you didn't know. The Coombe House Theater was housed in the Midtown Art Center. The Midtown Art Center, we had the Coombe House Theater. Upstairs, we had lofts for artists, and a museum, and a bookstore. That's lost history. That's lost history, students. You mean you had all that? We had a theater and a museum, okay? And we rented the building, and artists were able to stay upstairs. Okay, let's go to the next one. And we had, of course, we have the Encore Theater, founded in 1994 by Harold Haynes. Harold is a brilliant director. I've seen his plays. Harold Haynes has done a lot for young actors, and he's done a lot of work. We had Fade, why you put Fade to Black up there? I don't know why you did that. Didn't I tell you not to put that on there? Jesus, baby. I said, look, don't put that on there. For what? They ain't done nothing. That's not the, no, I'm just kidding. Let me tell you, I wanted to bring you from the griots to the Fade to the Black. And I'm saying I am so proud of Denise O'Neil. Let's give her a hand. Because she continues the legacy. She's continuing this legacy that we started in Africa. She's giving playwrights a chance to perform their works, and actors perform. And what I love about her and the concept here is that There are no winners. We're all winners. That means that you go in giving it your best and you feel legitimized when you finish. Am I right? You don't feel like I'm less than you or less than that. So she has allowed playwrights to come from all over the country to exhibit their works, and actors collaborate and express themselves. So we are in good shape with Black theater. We're in good shape. And I'll close by saying this. Continue to tell our stories. We are faced with so much going on now. Artificial intelligence, social media. The stage is our territory for telling our stories. Do not stop. The next generation, they need actors on the stage who talk and breathe and laugh and cry. We need you to continue the legacy of Black theater. Continue the legacy. Thank you very much.